Hello, I'm Suchila Study Ioana, or you can call me Ioana. Today I will present a paper about informality and institutional work during the COVID-19 crisis with the case of motorbike online taxi or ojol in Indonesia. Our study looked on the intersections between digital platform innovators who provided service in informal sectors, or in the sense informal mobility, and how they respond to exogenous force. A digital platform innovations can be defined as the introductions of new digital medium that actors use to develop, provide, and use product or service. There are growing numbers of digital startups that aims to transform informal economy by using digital technology. In practice, mostly informal economies consider as opportunity to nurture an unregulated market. Digital application seeks opportunity in informal economy because usually it is limited or only few regulations that give more flexibility for these innovators to experiment their business model. Dominant strategy of digital innovators are to formalize the business activities of already established informal services, and the strategy is without any controversy and contestations. So in this paper, we're trying to add one more element, which is crisis, in the sense the COVID-19 crisis, and how does this somehow influence and shape the institutional work that is employed by these digital innovators. In order to do that, we chose the case of Indonesian online taxi because we think that it's an important example of contestations between informal online taxi practices and formalizations effort by these digital innovators through platform company. Well, in Indonesia, there has been an established informal motorbike taxi since the 1980s, positioned as informal transport that operates informally and illicitly and somewhat outside officially sanctioned passenger transport. There were many attempts that has been conducted by the local ojek riders to fill the institutional void to be more legal. But it is not until the emergence of digital platforms such as Gojek and Grab in Indonesia in 2015 as digital applications company that open online ojek services, or popularly called as ojol, which bring us significant contributions to the formalization of ojek services. However, until now, the status of ojol is not yet legally well defined due to many rejections and safety aspect of motorbike as passenger transport service. The argument from those who reject it is motorbike cause more accidents than cars. So in this research, we try to structure our paper based on two interrelated questions. The first one, what was the institutional work deployed by Gojek and Grab to respond to COVID-19 crisis in the context of urban mobility? And to bring more general reflections to the informality and digital platform, our second question is, how do platform economy actors in the informal economy respond to the major external crisis? And what does this tell us on systemic change in informal economy stimulated by exogenous shocks? Well, here are some results on our research in these topics. The first one, we're trying to map the different or the change in the landscape of urban mobility because of the COVID-19 crisis. We found that there are two different changes. The first one is the immediate change that is caused by the COVID-19 crisis, where during this COVID-19 crisis, the motorbike taxi at the beginning was being forbidden to give services on the street due to physical distancing, and then due to a lot of stay-at-home policy from the government, lockdown, and also a lot of limitations to public transport. So this COVID-19 crisis was the immediate exogenous force. However, the longer-term exogenous force was actually the digital innovation itself through the platformizations. What are the exogenous force that brought by this platform company? First, the change of service provider from manual service provider or person to person into these services operated by digital applications or digital applications. And in these digital applications, it changed a lot of the transaction, which is mostly conducted by digital transactions and through hierarchical nature of platform, a lot of automatizations of order and works, including in the taxi services and the use of mobility as a service principle. So we employed 5 strategy of institutional change in this research, which actually divided into 5 strategies, which is framing or an attempt to deliberate the usage of frame to give meaning to a givens, and then theorizations provide a model to conceive how innovations could function, stimulating collaborations defined as initiative to involve other stakeholders, lobbying, advocacy to get actors with political power on one side, and negotiations. So from each of these strategies, we identified what are actually this company that we are studying here is Gojek and Grab is trying to conduct it, what kind of strategy that they are trying to conduct during the crisis. For example, for the framing, we found that during this time of crisis, especially on the first lockdown, because that was actually the critical moment of this crisis where there are a lot of pressures, a lot of immediate force that push this company to change their directions. So in terms of framing, we found out actually there is an attempt to construct a frame of these object riders or the workers of this platform company as a high risk and vulnerable group. High risk in terms of the nature of their work, because they have to do the work on the street and meet people, while actually the context at the time is avoiding any physical contact. And vulnerable in terms of if they don't do their work, then they don't have income. So they become very vulnerable during the crisis. And we found that this kind of frame has been employed frequently, not only by the company, but also by the workers community during the crisis. And the second, in terms of the theorizations, during the first lockdown, all motorbike taxi was prohibited by the Indonesian government. But one interesting thing is that these prohibitions only takes 1 week to be canceled. And we found, and we was trying to identify what happens during this prohibitions of taxi services. And we found that there is an attempt or somehow a process to conceive a new innovations through social media, through hashtag this Butuh Driver as an alternative model for riders to get the additional customer. We found that this hashtag somehow become the alternative from the digital platform as a media to get orders from their customers. The third one on stimulating collaborations. So these 2 companies also launched an online medical consultations in collaborations with the local doctors and the local pharmacy, because at that time the demand to have this telemedicine is very high due to the physical distances policy. And then the fourth strategy is into lobbyings. There are many attempts conducted by the companies as well as the workers community to not only criticize, but also try to push the Ministry of Transportations to become more facilitating their demands. And that's how then the prohibitions of taxi services only last for 1 week. And then in terms of negotiation, there is an interesting negotiations going on actually from the prohibition of these taxi services to the cancellations of the prohibition. That they are trying to negotiate the meaning of health protocols. So then the result is they trying to shape this different meaning of health protocols into physical and materials visualizations. For example, they have the shield, the plastic shield, in order to keep the distance, this physical distance with their customers. And they're also using masks and trying to do hand sanitizers as a way to perform these health protocols. So what can we what kind of insight we could get from this institutional work conducted by these two companies during the COVID-19 crisis? We found that in terms of transitions of motorbike taxi in Indonesia, at the era of 80s to 2000s, motorbike taxi was perceived and seen or framed as a transport for transition. It means that they only exist on the road temporarily until all the public transport in Indonesia is sufficient. And they only perceive as a gap fillers for those people or customer who cannot get access to the public transport. However, of course, these frame and transport for transition is still very long lasting until now, because even in the 2000 until 2020, the motorbike taxi exists and even growing in a very large numbers in the urban cities. Especially this kind of high growth of a motorbike taxi is influenced by the platformizations. The platformization somehow increased the demand to have these services. So then the frame was actually shift or changed from motorbike taxi as transport for transitions into motorbike taxi as a social transport. Social transport in this sense means that they are actually not a legal transport services, but because the people or the high demand of this service, they become somehow socially, their existence becomes somehow socially tolerated. And in terms of the COVID-19 cases, we found that actually there is even higher functions of this motorbike taxi as a public infrastructure. Public infrastructure we meant here as how the services of online taxi become the main fabric of the urban mobilities during the COVID-19 crisis. The policy of work from homes from the government then somehow enforce people to have more demand in the delivery service and also doing logistic. And that's when these motorbike taxi services fill in this kind of somehow public demand and public services. So that actually somehow their services is becoming more and more crucial in keeping the daily fabrics of the urban societies. But somehow we also found that the regulations, how the service is conducted, are still very much privately regulated by this major company. The other insights for discussions is that we found how this COVID-19 crisis somehow give a very dramatic change of mobility due to a lot of physical contacts prohibitions. And actually it becomes many research that trying to say that it has become a window of opportunity. But what we see is somehow in this research, we found that this crisis is become an opportunity to stabilize rather than opportunity for changing the urban mobility. Stabilize in a sense to strengthening the positions of this platform company in the countries by looking on the very high growth of this platform company business during the COVID-19 crisis, and also by a lot of flexibilities of regulations conducted because to these two platform company because of COVID-19 crisis. And then we also found, or we also have reflect how informality is a precarious in natures, in the sense of motorbike taxi as informal mobility, and how crisis has also become a stabilization process to perpetual this precariousness of the conditions of informal workers. So that's all, and I hope I'm looking forward to hear any comments or any questions from you, and looking forward to have a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.